A diagram that relates capital-labor ratio to consumption per worker at steady state. The Solow Growth Model is a fundamental framework in intermediate macroeconomics that helps us understand how economic growth is influenced by capital accumulation and labor. In this guide, we will explore this relationship through a diagrammatic illustration, enhancing your understanding of these essential economic concepts. Understanding the Solow Growth Model. The Solow Growth Model, developed by economist Robert Solow in the 1950s, emphasizes the role of capital accumulation, labor force growth, and technological advancement in driving economic growth. Key components of the Solow Growth Model. Capital-labor ratio, K/L. This ratio measures the amount of capital available per worker in the economy. It is crucial because it affects productivity and, ultimately, consumption levels. Steady state. The steady state is a condition where the economy's capital-labor ratio remains constant over time. At this point, investment in new capital equals depreciation and the effects of population growth. Consumption per worker, C/L. This metric represents the average consumption per worker in the economy. It is influenced by the capital-labor ratio and the productivity of the workers. The model is built on the following core assumptions. Production function. The economy produces goods using a Cobb-Douglas production function, which incorporates both capital, K, and labor, L. This can be expressed as Y equals F, K, L, equals K caret backslash alpha L caret 1 dash backslash alpha, where backslash alpha is the output elasticity of capital. Diminishing returns. The model incorporates the principle of diminishing returns to capital, which suggests that as more capital is added, the additional output produced from each unit of capital decreases. The capital-labor ratio and its importance. The capital-labor ratio, K/L, is a crucial variable in the Solow Growth Model. It represents the amount of capital available per worker in the economy. A higher capital-labor ratio typically leads to increased productivity, which in turn affects consumption per worker. To better understand the relationship between the capital-labor ratio and consumption per worker at steady state, we can illustrate this with a diagram. Capital-labor ratio versus consumption per worker. In the diagram above, the x-axis represents the capital-labor ratio, K/L. The y-axis represents consumption per worker, C/L. The upward-sloping curve indicates that as the capital-labor ratio increases, consumption per worker also rises, reflecting higher productivity and efficiency in the economy. Analyzing the diagram. Initial point, at a lower capital-labor ratio, consumption per worker is relatively low. This is due to limited capital available for each worker, resulting in lower productivity. Increasing returns. As the capital-labor ratio increases, there is an initial increase in consumption per worker. This is where the benefits of capital accumulation can be seen, as workers have more tools and equipment to enhance their productivity. Diminishing returns. However, as the capital-labor ratio continues to rise, we eventually reach a point where the increase in consumption per worker begins to taper off. This illustrates the concept of diminishing returns, where additional capital leads to smaller increases in output and consumption. Steady state. At the steady state, the economy stabilizes, and the capital-labor ratio and consumption per worker reach their equilibrium levels. Here, the economy grows at a constant rate, driven by technological progress rather than capital accumulation alone. Implications for economic policy. Understanding the relationship between the capital-labor ratio and consumption per worker at steady state has significant implications for economic policy. Investment in capital. Policymakers should focus on creating an environment conducive to capital investment. This can include tax incentives, subsidies for research and development, and infrastructure improvements. Labor force development. Enhancing the skills and productivity of the labor force is equally important. Education and training programs can help workers adapt to new technologies and increase their productivity. Technological advancement. Encouraging innovation and technological progress is critical for sustained economic growth. Investments in technology can shift the production function, allowing for higher consumption per worker at any given capital-labor ratio. In summary, the relationship between the capital-labor ratio and consumption per worker at steady state is a vital concept within the Solow Growth Model. Through our diagrammatic illustration, we can see how increases in capital can lead to higher consumption, while also recognizing the limits imposed by diminishing returns. A comprehensive understanding of this relationship can guide policymakers in fostering an environment that promotes economic growth and enhances the well-being of workers. For further reading on the Solow Growth Model and its implications, consider exploring the following scholarly sources. Solow, R.M., 1956. A Contribution to the Theory of Economic Growth. The Quarterly Journal of Economics. Asemoglu, D. 2009. Introduction to Modern Economic Growth. Princeton University Press.